the Salem witch trials may actually be related to the consumption of bread that was contaminated because people got hysterical and there were severe hallucinations, central nervous system effects.
It is thought that the Salem witch trials, there may have been a particular mold growing on the rye in that particular region, producing LSD, which is a psychedelic drug, of course, and it made the individuals think that they had been bewitched. And indeed, it's thought that the Salem witch trials may indeed have been caused by mold growing on grain.
I want to be sure that people just don't go on this witch hunt for mold, because it can be a significant problem, but just because you have it doesn't mean it's necessarily a problem.
When a person calls my office and they say, I know I have a mold issue in my home, we sort of have to act as detectives and say, okay, why is it that you say that? Well, I heard on the news last night that we are having a toxic mold problem, and I know that I'm one of the citizens that are being affected.
The best way to deal with a panicked homeowner is to in fact verify very scientifically that in fact you have a mold problem and there is exposure.
The mildew on your bathroom wall is what we ought not to be alarmed about. But in those rare and narrow instances in which you have serious mold exposure, it indeed is a problem.
Suspect conditions would include smells. If you can smell that musty smell.
If it's an odor, where's the odor coming from? If it's a particular room in your house that you always tend to feel ill in, maybe that's a good screening tool, but not being able to smell is not a good indicator.
One could have a situation where the water intrusion event occurred several days, weeks, or months previous. You could miss them.
If you can see water stains, those are telltale signs that there have been water incursions. Those are the conditions that mold looks for.
Once you're pretty sure that you've got a mold problem, you want to call out someone who is going to be able to in fact tell you that you have an exposure to mold. And the mere fact of its existence does not necessarily mean that there's been an exposure.
Get good quality examinations from the best sources that you possibly could.
It really is difficult to pick a good consultant. There's no Better Business Bureau or a place like that you can call.
There are many companies out there nowadays that we have to be aware of. Check the reputation of the company thoroughly.
Buyer beware, could not be a more appropriate term to this, for this industry.
Rules being a consumer. You need to shop around.
You want to interview the home inspector. How many inspections have they done? What training they've had? What their background is, whether they have a comprehensive construction background.
When you contact an inspector to come out and look at your home with respect to whether in fact there is a mold problem or not, they will first do a thorough visual inspection, and they should also do a fairly thorough interview. They'll ask you about prior water intrusion issues. If you're seeing visible mold, obviously you're going to want to show them where.
We do what we call a snapshot air sample taken inside the property, and at the same time we take a few air samples outside the property.
If the count outside your home is lower than the counts inside your home, then your home may have an issue.
They're using a forced airflow sampler. You sample air at a known flow rate for a known amount of time. Very similar to what many cities are doing with pollen counts.
Basically, it just collects all particulates to be observed under a microscope.
I always recommend that one goes in and does both a culturable method as well as a microscopic method.
We use several different surface samples, use swabs, tapes, bulks, which are basically just variations of the same type of thing. You're just trying to isolate some mold off of a surface.
We can analyze for another group of chemicals that are indicative of mold and fungus growth.
These samples are going to be transported to an accredited laboratory and be analyzed by someone who is independent from the investigator. The investigator should generate a report which is then sent to you.
If there is a positive concentration, we could give the residents a heads up to seek help or whatever they may want to do with these results.
If in fact you have a significant mold problem, then the next step is to contact a remediation contractor. You will need to deal with that mold because it's not going to go away by itself.
As opposed to focusing on identifying these types of molds, we should pay a lot more attention as to why the problem exists.
You have to certainly find out what's causing the mold. You've got to deal with the water intrusion first, and then at the same time you want to remediate, remove the mold damaged materials and get the building back to where it was.
There's people that will tell you, if you find 2 square inches of mold in your shower, that you should burn your house down.
It's necessary to take these steps with caution so that we can be sure that we are indeed protecting the public.
If I look into this, it's like opening Pandora's box. Well, let me tell you, Pandora's box is already open across the country.